Hi, John Parrillo, CEO of Parrillo Performance. For a lot of years, I hate to say how many, I've been working with bodybuilders on their training and nutrition. And today we're going to try to, with this video, we're going to try to explain how easy it is to do certain things that some people think are impossible, like gain muscle and lose fat at the same time. Let me give you a little background. My first bodybuilding contest, I read in Strength and Health what all the pros were doing. They were drinking 3 bottles a day, 16-ounce bottles of cherry-flavored liquid collagen. Well, I got in my first bodybuilding contest. I did that, and I did that for 6 or 8 weeks, and I went down to a weight I hadn't weighed since I was a freshman in high school. And I was in my mid to late 20s then, and lost all my muscle. And I remember standing up and almost fainting. Well, here I was, had 8 years of analytical sciences. I was majoring in chemistry, and I said, boy, there's got to be a better way than this. So I started just tracking my diet. I said, okay, let's make a science out of this. And at the same time, since I was a person in chemistry, everybody used to come to me and ask me questions on hey, what about this, what about that? Well, I wouldn't know the answer, and I'd try to look it up, and then I'd tell them what I thought, and they would, okay, yeah, and not paying attention to it. So I was working out with a lot of bodybuilders, and they were asking me questions. So I said, boy, I have the perfect experimental group here. Now, how do I get them to do what I want them to do? And so I had this little method. I'd say, I don't know, when they'd ask me a question, I don't know, let me call California, and I'll see if I can figure out the answer. And then the next day I'd come back, called California, and they'd be all ears. I didn't know anybody in California, but they would do exactly what I told them because that's what the guy in California said. So that's how I started learning, and that's when everybody was dieting on very low calories to get in contests. Some of the pros were writing in the magazines that they were eating 600 calories a day, and it was just, so I started working with diets, and then I developed a body stat method where, okay, we were checking ourselves on the scale and how we looked and how our lifts went, but okay, let's look at then what if we can be more precise what's going on. So I came up with a way to measure your lean mass and your body fat. It's a 9-point site. It was real easy to do. You get good at it. It takes less than 5 minutes. And so we're able to refine the diets more and more. And we just started out eating regular foods, and we put things in the diet, out of the diet, and saw what foods worked the best. I was the first person to say it was heresy that fruit made you fat, and now they didn't even know the physiological fate of fructose when you ate it. They knew it didn't raise your blood sugar, but they didn't know much else about it. It wasn't in Guyton's Anatomy. It wasn't anywhere to look up. So a lot of things I found out just by trial and error, and I started working with people and getting them great results. And people started coming in and calling me from all over the country and coming in to train, even from some foreign countries. So I thought I'd better really get going with this and really refine it, and Parrillo Performance was built. But we're going to show you in this video how the basics of nutrition and what happens to the food you eat. So this is really how simple it is. So when you eat your food, it has to it goes in your stomach and then it gets digested. Well, it gets digested, where does it go? Well, it goes into your bloodstream. From your bloodstream, that's what carries, so this is what this video is. Under the curve are the nutrients in your bloodstream. That's what's there, and we're going to explain what happens to them. So when you eat, especially any types of, let's say and this is talking about a person that's working out, and he's trying to eat right. So he eats a meal, and so the fats, the sugars, and the proteins go into the bloodstream. So what happens is your pancreas secretes insulin to lower your blood sugar as your blood sugar starts to go up. It does this by making the cells more permeable so they absorb the nutrients. Well, the muscle cells especially love the protein and they love the carbohydrates, but at the same time, the fats are going into the fat cells. So you got an anabolic state after you eat where your proteins and your carbs are going into your muscles to be used for energy or to use to build muscle or being stored. The carbohydrates are stored to use in the future, and your muscles actually turn it into glycogen, makes it its own starch out of it, and then stores it, which binds water. And that's why actually when you get a pump, when your muscles are full, they fill out and they swell up, and they fill up with basically glycogen and water. So now realize also your muscle cells is they're the most metabolically active, where most of the nutrients go. So we're interested in, they can only absorb so fast. So there's a limit to what they can absorb, and that's the line you see now where we're putting that line in. So your nutrients can only be absorbed so fast. So anything more than that is called spillover. That's where it spills over to your fat stores, where the carbohydrates can actually get turned into fat, or any fat you eat with that meal is going to go right into the fat cells, because your insulin works the same on your fat cells as it does on your muscle cells. So it makes them permeable. So when the fat cells love fat, so when you eat that meal, all the fat's going into your fat cells. When you look in the mirror and you see all that fat you don't like, 95% of that came from the fat in your diet. So we're going to show you how to eat here so you can maximize your anabolic state. We can keep pushing nutrients into the muscle cells and minimize your fat stores. So if we do this right, we're always going to be burning a little bit of fat. If we eat a low-fat diet and we eat multiple meals, we can actually stay in an anabolic state and actually grow muscle and burn off any of the fat we've burnt off without replacing it. So we want to stay in an anabolic state. That's when the muscle cells are growing. Okay, the first thing you have to do to get a muscle cell to grow is you have to get the building blocks, the proteins, into the muscle cells so it can build muscle. Then there has to be a stimulus from working out to grow new muscle, and you have to have enough carbohydrate energy so you don't burn your protein off for energy. So when we eat the meal, we want to get the protein and the carbs into the muscle cells. We don't want the fat to go into the fat cells. Well, hey, guess what? If we eat too much, we're going to get fat into the fat cells. We're going to actually turn some of the carbohydrates into fat and put them into fat cells. And if we eat too refined of carbs, we're going to spike that insulin, and we're going to get the fat into the fat cells, and we're going to turn a lot more of the carbs into fat. So we want to eat basically. So what you're seeing first is what happens when you eat 3 meals, basic meals a day. First, you're in an anabolic state. And then when your blood sugar goes down, then you get the opposite hormone, glucagon, secreted by your pancreas. But you're basically you're giving up, your muscle cells are not taking in any carbohydrate energy or any protein, so they're actually burning off energy. So they're in a catabolic state. They're actually shrinking, and your fat cells are actually catabolic. They're shrinking because you're giving up fat for energy. So you're going through an anabolic, catabolic thing with your 3 meals a day. And then if you eat a lot of fat or overfeed yourself, you can't burn off as much as you've added in, so you get fatter. If you're working out, you'll put on muscle too. So now we want to show you what happens. Let's eat 3 meals a day, and let's eat a better diet. So we're going to take out some of the refined carbs, and we're going to eat a lot more starches and a lot more fiber with our protein, and see what happens in the curve now. Now we spread that digestion over a longer time, and so you're in an anabolic state longer. We're not peaking the curve, or we're not peaking the insulin release. So most of the curve now is in an anabolic state. You got much less in spillover, and now you're in a catabolic state a lot less. So now you're eating a better diet, you're putting on more muscle, and you're adding less fat. Now let's go to a bodybuilding diet. Let's go to 6 small meals a day. Hey, look, we're keeping ourselves in an anabolic state. Now that anabolic state, we want to be for our muscles with protein and carbohydrates. An anabolic state can also be for your fat cells. So if we eat fat with those 6 meals, they're going into the fat cells too. So we want to keep the fat real low, and we want to keep the protein and the carbs high, and we want to keep feeding the muscle cells and not the fat cells. And yes, you need fats, certain fats, like you need vitamins and minerals called essential fatty acids. So we want to make sure we take a source of those. All you need is 2, 3, or 4 evening primrose oil tablets, a tablespoon or 2 of flaxseed oil a day. That's all you need for your essential fatty acid source. Now if we're giving ourselves a stimulus from working out to grow muscle, we're going to put on muscle and burn fat off at the same time, because every time we burn fat off, we're not refeeding the fat cells. See how simple this is?